It's kind of sort of in there. I get in there and take a bracket loose and see if I can't get this thing to go down in there further. Well, making progress. So I went ahead and cut this out a little bit so I can get the V-belts underneath of it in the future should I need to. I've got enough room that it will go anyway, but a little clearance extra wouldn't hurt. Sawed these hangover pieces off so the oil pan can come all the way forwards and get the maximum clearance. Come over here and notch the frame rail where the air compressor sits. So got it clearance. I'm gonna have to reroute this line. It was down here. I still may be able to run it under, but I can't run it under like it is. It's really too short, but I might have to get a new one made to make it the way I want. If it came underneath of this big hose and ran back and went up and over, it'd be a lot better. I think it's going to interfere with the radiator anyway in the future when I get this back. So I need to bolt this valve back over. Here I had it loose to be able to get in there and cut that out. I need to come here and drill these holes all the way through there for the radiator support. And my plan is to bolt the radiator to the other side of that block using all the same hardware. So that'll gain me 3 inches of length, and it will fit between that support. So I think that's a good way to do it without changing too much. So while I got the engine out this time, where I got good access, I'm gonna go ahead and drill them and tap them from this. I might have to get some longer taps because I'll probably tap all the way through from this side because I won't be able to come back from the other side. That could make it a little challenging. I guess worst case, I have to drill the holes out oversized and run bolts all the way through with nuts. But that gets the engine sitting in line with the pump. Crank lines up correctly. I still have to fabricate up a bracket for the front of the engine to hold there. The rear brackets, the original ones, I've cut them down and marked here on the frame where it needs to weld back. So I may go just a touch lower than this. I've gone low anyway because I can shim up, but if they're welded in too high, I won't have any adjustment in the back should I happen to need it once I get the transmission bolted in here. But you can see that there's a fair bit of pitch on that box there. So they had the original engine mounted running downhill pretty good, pinion angle. So I'm going to keep that about the same if possible. This side over here is going to be tough to weld in because of those hoses, but I should be able to drag them out of the way and get in there and get that done. See that hose, got to do something with it. That's where it's going to weld in on this side. Fuel tank has to be drained. Really needs a return put in it, but I don't know. I may just be able to tee the return back into the pickup side. Sometimes that causes problems with getting the fuel too hot, but this thing's not going to run a lot most of the time, so might get by with it. Or might have to put another fitting in. So it's not the worst thing I've ever had to work on as far as space and ease of use. This vacuum canister that was for the brakes, I'll take it out, try and find an air tank the same size. Now I can even reuse these brackets and I can just put the air tank in here and that'll be perfect. And that already exists, so that's a good deal. But getting the engine set in here is the main thing for now. Then I can work on some other stuff. Well, I got all my angle iron cut, notched, and fitted, and spot welded to make my front motor mount bracket. So I'm gonna unbolt this off here and take it over to the lift and check and make sure that I'm good. And if I am, I'll finish welding this thing out. Well, I have separated the transmission. And of course, as always, usually find a mystery piece in there that you have no idea where it came from. Thought maybe it was a piece of a pilot bearing, but the diameter is too small. So it was laying in the bottom of the clutch housing there. So that window was open, but I don't know where it came from, and I don't see where it came from anywhere here. But maybe when I get the clutch off here, I'll be able to see what's going on, if there's anything up in front of that that's busted and come loose. So if my impact will do the job, I'm gonna back that sucker off there. I'm going to take these loose in an alternating pattern so as the spring pressure releases, it doesn't warp the plate. Well, as you can see, it's a recessed flywheel. The one I have on my Cummins is flat, so it could affect this somewhat. I'll just have to see what it wind up with here. There's the clutch. Might be time for a new one anyway. Not a lot of fin vent left in there. It's not down to the rivets, but it's probably been used a lot. Could be the original clutch for this machine. I don't know. It's not got a lot of wear, but input shaft looks okay. And it's a good size, so I don't think I'm going to have to worry about just snapping this thing off like a lot of people have said it's probably going to happen with this extra power from the Cummins. That's at least 1 3/8" shaft, so bigger than what comes in a Dodge pickup truck from the factory, at least in the old ones. Well, I guess I'll give a walkthrough update. So, what I wound up doing on this back end, I've decided that rather than try to figure out a way to adapt that clutch, because the bolt pattern's not right, the hole spacing's wrong, I don't have a stepped flywheel, so there'd be a lot of fabrication to make that clutch work. Then the next thing is that's an SAE 3 bell housing. The one that Cummins is a 2. So that takes a spacer ring. So then everything comes back another inch. Then the input shaft's too short. The pilot bearing is wrong anyway. So making that transmission work, I've decided it's probably not going to be the best option. Because it's going to take a lot of adapting to get that hooked onto the Cummins. So what I decided to do was to source the transmission that belongs on the Cummins, because I was able to buy one of them for $300. So then I can use the clutch that came with the parts motor. So I've got to get it reinstalled on here. Then all that bolts up like it's supposed to. And I kind of like keeping stuff stock as much as possible when I'm doing these kind of jobs, because in the future you can get parts. Whereas if you make everything a special one-off, then you're pretty much screwed into having to make everything a special one-off again whenever you work on anything. So the more I can keep of stock parts, the happier I'll be in the long run, I think. But what that runs into is, according to my measurements, I have very little room to where the drive shaft goes on there, and I'm going to have to do something about the yoke, and I could run into an issue anyway, because I can't go a whole lot bigger on the yoke there and clear the parking brake shaft. So might wind up in more rework to make this all work. But I'll have to say, for now, I'm thinking the transmission is going to be the easier way to go, because the drive shaft's got to be modified anyway, because it's the transmission and everything's all sitting further back than what it was when I started this deal. It just barely clears the hydraulic mount. It's where it belongs, other than it's not tightened down, so it will raise up some on this end where it's touching the bell housing right now. It does raise up off of it when it's flat. So, but other than that, it's sitting on the mounts, and I got rubbers and washers to go on the lower side for counter torque. But the engine's gonna have to come out again anyway. It's just sitting in there, but I gotta lift it back out to get the transmission put on it and put it all down in here. And this is an assembly, because I can't put the transmission in very easy because of the roll cage superstructure. So I'd have to try and run the chains through that in order to get it where it needs to be. And I don't really want to do that, so I think it's be better to just put it in all in one shot. So I'll pull the engine back out, put the transmission on it, and put it all in as one deal. And hopefully I'm close to lining up right, or if anything, I'll be low, and I can just shim the mounts in the back of the engine to bring it up to get it in line. And there's been some changing around on the front side. Here I had to get a smaller engine fan. The one that came with the parts engine was way too big. It would actually hit these brackets on the inside. So I went back to an 18-inch fan. Should be plenty good for this. It's not going to run hot in this because it's not going to be under load very much. It's a very light load application, except for a few intermittent bursts. But for the most part, it's just piddling around at idle. So, but it is in there. And it's sitting on the motor mounts. And I need to clearance this harmonic dampener I got. I bought it for $100. It's got the bolts in it for the pump drive. So that was a way to go on that versus trying to drill and tap the existing one and probably make it super weak and likely to break through, because this just got just a little bit here where you could go in and put the bolts in. That's not very good. So I got two options. I could either turn down the outer ring, which does affect the torsional tuning somewhat. The bigger diameter is actually better for higher power applications, but not necessary really for this application. So I could turn it down, but it would affect the balance probably. It is balanced currently. I don't know how close it is or how much it would really matter taking it off. Surely it's not that much due to material, just a piece of steel on the outside versus casting on the inside. So could turn it down, but I'm just going to notch that support a little bit more underneath of it, grind out a 1/4 inch or so. Plates inch thick. And it's got that giant axle piece. It's welded triangle underneath of it all the way across. So I'm not worried that it's going to structurally decrease any of that enough for it to be an issue. Waiting on the rubber to make the motor mount on this end still. It's been ordered for weeks. Unfortunately, it's one of those unscrupulous eBay sellers that says they have it in stock, but in reality they don't, because they just create a shipping label and then they don't ship it for weeks and weeks while they're waiting to get it. But they act like they shipped it, but nobody ever receives it. It just shows that the label was created and that nobody ever got it. So that's their way they get around of eBay, slap them in the face for not shipping stuff when they're supposed to. But it really pisses me off. I don't like it, because it screws me out of being able to get my stuff done, because I've been 3 weeks waiting on a motor mount I should have had in 3 days. But that's the way it goes, I guess. So maybe someday it'll show up and I'll be able to finish this end of it. But for now, I guess I'll have to just work on this pump drive deal. So I went up and got all the stuff off of one of my ISC motors. This is the pump drive stuff for it. It's the flange and yoke that came with it. It bolts up there, so I get this adapted to that. It might be easier just to get the bigger yokes to go on here, but I mean, I don't know, it's whatever. That's just plenty big enough, really. What I would do there, could just make another adapter piece to bolt onto this and then bolt it to that. Either way, I still got to chop that down. It's too long, so I'll think some more about that. I got one here that's good, where they cut the actual slip shaft, so it's possible I could take this and weld it to that. I think that's probably what I'll wind up doing. So that looks like a pretty good option. As long as I got the right, as long as the length will come up correct. So I had to lower the fan back down too, so it would clear the filler neck on the radiator. When I sit the radiator in here on this side, it does sit good. I like the clearance. I think that's gonna work all right. So radiator sitting there, ready to go back in. So I need to pull the truck around here and get the transmission out. You can see the motor mount that I built down there. That's what the engine's sitting on right now. It's not actually on the crank dampener, although it's really close. But once I grind that out there where I put my paint marks, then it will have good clearance. And I can get the belt on past the bracket, so that should work just fine. And you can see where I got the frame rail notched out over there for the engine to sit over. The hydraulic hoses are all run through there. Nothing's rubbing. I'll have to make an extension for that hose to come up here where it hooked. Before it was running here under the radiator, and it really needs to be down underneath anyway. So that will affect that. This is got the new fan. It's a made in USA fan from Superior Diesel, I think is where I got that. It was pretty affordable. It's like 80 bucks for that fan. And seems to be a quality piece. And they were the only ones I could find that actually gave the specs for the mount, so I could be sure that it was what I needed. And that's one of the big problems with piecing these projects together, is being able to come up with all the parts you need, because without the specifications it's hard to know what fits what, unless you just happen to have one laying around that you can go by. So, see the fabricated mount. I put some shorter bolts in there, obviously, but this is still in mock-up stages at the moment. But the crank center lines line up pretty decent. So there it sits in there. Not a lot of extra room, but it does fit. Well, that's going to be the stopping point for this video. I think that gives you a good update on where I'm at and what all's been involved with getting this to sit in here to this point. So I got a lot more work to do with the littler stuff, but as far as will it fit, it looks like at least that's going to be workable. It does go down in there okay. And I do have the fuel tank set up, fixed. I'll probably show you that next time, but I basically just put a T in the bottom of the tank. I'm going to return the fuel into the original drain, and then the regular drains in the bottom of the T. So that keeps the fuel from getting aerated from the return, just dumping in on top of the tank. So it'll be good when it gets low on fuel. But I'm still going to use this factory pickup to draw fuel out of it so I don't get any trash or rust out of the bottom of the tank. And that should be good. Filters mounted on the engine, so I don't have to worry about anything as far as that goes. So I'll get the steering fixed. I think I showed you that when I was trying to move this thing when the engine quit a long time ago. Of course, there's no hydraulics for the power steering when it's not running. And I was turning on it, and this guide pin that follows the worm, this is what actually turns your steering arm. It destroyed it, so it wouldn't steer anymore. Also, you can see these splines. I don't know if I did that or if that was another event some other time, but you can see they're pulled a whole spline off there, but it hasn't broke yet. And I'm sure this shaft's not available, so we're gonna go with it as it is and try and be sure we have power when it's steering from now on, so I don't put a bunch of load on that and destroy it. This is really only for steering feel. The hydraulics are supposed to do the steering, as I've come to find out. Enough room to be able to get the exhaust out down through there. I'll have to build that too. And the back end lines up with that notch. You can see the valve cover just barely clears there. So should be good. Only I'm not sure now is if that turbo is going to be up too high and it's going to hit, but if it does, I'll have to do something different. Maybe find a smaller housing or change the mount around. But it's kind of where it needs to be because there's not a lot of width in there to come out with it, because these hydraulics have to be able to move past that. So probably talk about taking these forks off to move the lift forward some more. And while it is a viable solution, those forks weigh several hundred pounds a piece, so it's a little hard for me to wrestle in and out on those pins. They don't just lift off. So we'll try and leave that if at all possible. I can get the engine in and out okay now that I have moved the lift up. So once I got the other engine in, I was able to move this one over and slide it forwards, get more room. Got a 3406 cat over there I got to put together, so that'll be another upcoming project. It is. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'll catch y'all later.